You. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming to LeadSquared Level and Brandon Rowe from National University talk about what it means to reimagine paper lead. Very excited to have you with us today. Please do use the comments on the right. You can ask us questions. We've got time carved out at the end here for questions, so we will definitely make space and really encourage you to think about what you would like to hear, learn, think about. We'll definitely take some time to answer those questions. We were just talking, we're all a little bit disappointed that there's not sock puppet driven webinars yet. I think that, for a future LeadSquared level webinar, we should do, AI sock puppet driven conversations. That is not today, unfortunately. So sorry for the teaser there, but got you listening, made you look. Evan, you can advance the slide. Evan's the wizard behind the curtain here. So we'll do quick introductions. I'm happy to start, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation today. So my name is Pat Van Gorder, president, co-founder of Level, all the way back in 2009. Have been in the higher education space from a performance marketing space, from a performance marketing context for my whole career. Came out of the pay per lead and affiliate world, so have a tremendous amount of experience both in as an aggregator, as a reseller, and ultimately as an agency that works with top PPL vendors today, and some of the top brands in the country from a education perspective. So I'm here to be the agency perspective, and I'm joined by two incredible partners today. I'm going to start with you, Enrique. Tell us about your perspective and your background.
Sounds good. Thanks, Pat. And hi, everyone. I'm Enrique Dutra. I would say I spent the past, 10 years in Silicon Valley, helping companies, startups, big tech, and everything in between to bring products to market. And if there is one thing that I've seen over and over is that the best product launches happen when the product teams build something that people actually want and need. I know this sounds obvious, but it's not always the case. So this was exactly why I joined LeadSquared just about a month ago. When I first saw the product in action, it just clicked. To me, I could see the massive opportunity right away. And as a director of product marketing here, I'm especially excited about how I can see those smart lead management systems and CRMs like us helping educational institutions to tap into a huge market opportunity that I feel like it can be even better explored. So yeah, really excited to be here today. And again, thanks for having me, Pat.
Yeah, thanks, Enrique. So that's, if I'm the agency perspective, Enrique is the technology partner perspective. And then that leaves our guest of honor, Brandon Rowe, for the brand perspective. So Brandon, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm the guest of no honor here. I'm Brandon Rowe. I'm the Associate Vice President of Performance Marketing for National University. I've been with National for about a little over 3 years. Have around 10 to 11 years in the education space. Prior to that, I spent 10 and a half years in running digital marketing teams at Hyundai, Toyota, and Nissan. About 10 and a half years there. And prior to that, running my own businesses. Started building websites over 30 years ago. About 1993 was my first website. And been in the technology since then. From a PPL perspective, I've known actually Pat for many years. I consider him a good friend. Probably over 10 years now, since I got into the education space. So I think a lot of what I've learned is underneath Pat's mind and background. I love education. Been here. I left for a little while during COVID. Went to grocery for a couple of years. Ran a grocery market for a grocery company. But I'm going to tell you, education is the place to be. I actually have the benefit to lead several teams here at National University. Media being one of them. I run all brand, the entire full funnel media brand. I have a brand media team. I have a direct response media team. I also run, my teams run the influencer strategies, SEO strategies, digital content. And then recently I just acquired the web development CRO teams that are now under one team called the user-centric performance UX team. So, but that's all considered performance. So anyway, that's what I'm here for. I'm just here to bring the brand and the client side to the table. So.
Thanks, Brandon. That's all. That's all in your job remit. That sounds like not a big job at all. All right,
yeah,
let's go to the next slide.
That's when I lost my hair.
So from a agenda perspective, as you can gather, we've made it through the introductions. We're going to start with our consensus problem statement, which is, what we see as wrong with pay per lead, and then we're going to talk about some different solutions for you as an advertiser, as a brand, even as a pay per lead vendor. For those of you that are joining us from that world, we've got sort of two sets of solution through lines for you, right? We've got a allocations and alternatives through line, which is, okay, if you accept this problem statement of this is what's wrong with pay per lead, you can solve it through your allocations, the way that you're distributing your budget, and the alternatives that you have for pay per lead, or you can solve it through doing better pay per lead, which is also something that we certainly ascribe for our clients, and we'll want to give you some specific tips to do that, and using tools like LeadSquared to be able to do that. And then finally, we're going to end with some bold predictions, end with the things that we, the directions that we see the market moving in 2025. As I said, we've got questions here at the end, but drop them in the chat as we go. Everybody who has done these knows it's really great to get dialogue and conversation going in the chat sort of as we go through. So please, encouraging you to use that feature and not just wait for the QA. Okay, so we started with trying to align on what our consensus problem statement is here, and I think where we ended up was basically the most simple, digestible, defensible formulation of this is pay per lead just doesn't work as well as it used to. We're going to try to break that out into some things that are descriptive of what it means to not work as well, and then we're going to try to assign some causes to that, and we'll do that in the next couple of slides. But just fundamentally, from a starting place, it used to be much easier to build your demand generation, your performance marketing strategy as an institution around a pay per lead first strategy. It was common to have brands that were 95% reliant on pay per lead as a source of paid leads. For a variety of reasons, you don't see those types of cases working nearly as well consistently across the market. If you go to the next slide, Enrique did a little bit of desegregation here to talk a little bit about what that means in more specific terms. So I wonder if you can set us up here in terms of when we say pay per lead is not working, what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, there are a few reasons. I don't think it's only tied to one, but there are a few things that we can highlight on why the PPL strategy is not as effective or not working anymore. The first and more obvious one is rising costs. We have been seeing some institutions reporting a cost per lead of up to $200. That's for normal institutions. For more specialized ones like grad institutions or so, it can go up to $1,000. So aside from the rising cost, the conversion is not great. We have been seeing some really low rates, around 2%, for instance. And when you look when you compare to first-party leads, for instance, when a prospect is going to our website, filling your forms, or finding your ad somewhere online, this conversion rate can double to 4 or 5%. So another issue that I feel like everyone is noticing, and Brandon can correct me here if I'm wrong, but the quality of the leads has been declining a lot. We have also internal data that tells us that up to 50% of the purchase leads never even bothered, to pick up the phone or to reply to an email. So this is pretty much a wasted investment, and also wasted, recruitment staffing hours. So not great there. Not to mention, obviously, the overlap as well in vendor supplied leads. You're paying a premium price, but the leads are not exclusive to you. So other institutions are buying from the same leads. So like I said, you're paying a really high price for a really a small return in that sense. And obviously the new regulations, I'm not sure how effective it is right now. I heard it was going to be implemented in January, the one-to-one consent rule, but I think they push for 12 months. But whenever this is in place, I feel like this is like kind of a bold statement, but it can be the end of PPL as a solution, not just for education, but for everything, because you have to track the exact source of the lead to a specific institution or business. So this is going to change the game. And I'm not sure if you guys agree, but this can be, game over or can be a major reshape on the PPL strategy.
If you want to go to the next slide, we've got a couple of stats here to support, some of what Enrique was just saying. So I think you referenced this UPSIA data here that shows that average cost per lead. This is all source, right? So this is not just pay per lead, but has increased about $140 and is even closer to 200 on the grad side. We did some digging into level data to have some comparables here, and it's an interesting spread. So if you look at level clients, all paid sources, so that's awareness, that's pay per lead, that's paid social, that's paid search. We're seeing a $96 client average for all paid sources. So under that UPSIA number, which you would expect. But the interesting thing here is the spread between all paid sources and pay per lead sources has decreased, right? So it's now $96 for all sources from level leads, and it's $60 for PPL specifically. So it used to be, Brandon and I remember a time where, you'd have to pay, $200 for a search lead, and you could get a pay per lead, probably a co-reg lead, but for $20, right? And then unless your pay per lead was performing 10 times worse than your search, that the economics of that could at least theoretically make sense, right? Not necessarily when you factor in total acquisition costs and the operational exertion to work those leads, but that makes a lot more sense when it costs 10x versus when it costs 1.5x. And then you see this Norris data that Enrique referenced, 2 to 3% conversion rate on PPL enrollments. Compare that to paid search conversion of 6 to 10%. So you're just not seeing the quality difference, or you're not seeing the cost difference being able to overcome the quality difference that is growing. And then the net of this is, Level generated 5,800 enrollments across our book of education clients in December. Only 4% of those were from pay per lead. So that's down, basically it's less than half of what it was a year ago. So that's, sort of the net of all of these things coming together, where ultimately a channel that was a consistent volume contributor, and a decent converter until you factored in the total acquisition costs, could look economically very attractive. Those dynamics have changed quite a bit. Brandon, any perspective, anything, when we looked at these data points together, was there anything that was surprising to you, or anything that you would call out or point out?
Well, first I want to say I'm surprised that 2 to 3% is actually really good. So we're nowhere close. But I want to put it in context, because data is data until you really put it into context, because we can make this data look really, really good. Let's pull out brand search out of it. Really, let's try to compare non-brand, because what I do internally is I'm very conscious to understand my media mixes and make sure that my media mixes are the proper media mix. On paper, upper management might say, or even my own teams might say, we need to start moving dollars from one source to another. But we have to strip out, like, search is always, agencies love to pull brand and non-brand together as one search bucket, right? You got to split that out, look at non-brand, and then compare yourself against non-brand, right? Is social media, for example, do you consider it a direct response, or do you consider it more of a mid to upper funnel play, right? So be careful of trying to manage your media spend based on putting social into the category of DR, right? But what's really, really important in this is, and we have a problem here, and I've had this problem in my past, and Pat remembers this. So when we kicked in at my last university, when we kicked in PPL, we never had PPL. We kicked it in. It was horrendous. Like literally nothing was converting. We isolated the number one problem. It wasn't necessarily 100% the quality, because other schools were converting. It wasn't the quality. It was that our enrollment teams weren't prepared to convert them. So we have to be careful of, like, we're generating leads and going, wow, marketing's doing, you know, buying a bunch of junk leads, but you got to understand that it's a different mindset on the other side. So what we ended up doing, we actually had to open up an entirely different call center, receiving call that could receive those leads and convert those leads. So that's why I always want to be cautious, because we're not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But unless we package it up correctly, the rest of the organization could look at PPL as a bad place to advertise and spend your money.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Brandon. And I think the major through line there is one that you'll hear when we get to talk about, like, how to make pay per lead work for you, and that's to not treat it like everything else, right? You have to have a differentiated contact strategy. You have to have a differentiated nurture strategy that tools like LeadSquared can support, and agencies like Level can help you develop a strategy that does that effectively. But if you're trying to treat all leads the same from a contact and outreach and nurturing perspective, this gap will only grow, and you will spend you will burn so many cycles chasing lower quality, lower converting leads that ultimately it will not only will it not look good from an economics perspective. Once you do the actual cost side of the equation, it will look even worse. And that's one that that's one of the things that we advise clients that are strategically trying to get a grasp of all of their mix and how it works together, is we advise that they assign a average like a total operating cost modifier. So every lead, take the total cost to run your admissions team, divide that by the total number of leads that you get for the period of time that you're looking at, and then apply that that cost equally to every lead, because you're nominally trying to reach and contact each lead out of that book. And what that will do is that will essentially put a premium or a priority on higher converting leads, because they take less calories to digest and to convert.
Well, we had and not underestimating the power of the cherry picking, right? Where if you're not careful, enrollment advisors will always cherry pick. They're going to go right to where they know they can convert, not have it's working, let's say, smarter, not harder in their ways. Yep. So, but on our side, we have to, like, wait a second, they're cherry picking. And again, at some point we'll talk about lead scoring, but the bottom line is without really clear understanding of your lead and lead quality, because there's a lot of nuggets of gold in there. And the problem is you have to mine a lot to get to those nuggets. But once you find that nugget, they convert, if not as good, if not better. Quite frankly, they're higher intent, because they're researching on PPL sites. They're already intent based. There's, in my opinion, PPL is search on steroids. People have to understand how to manipulate it and use it, right?
Absolutely. So just to call out in the chat and comments, if anyone has any questions about the Level index in terms of cost per in certain end markets, or certain types of degrees, certain education modalities, throw them in there. We won't answer those ones live, but we can follow up after the session to get you some good benchmarking data. Okay, next slide, Evan. So let's talk about why. And this is, I think, where the fun stuff starts to kick in here. So if that is true, and if that is our consensus reality, which it is, as to what's happening and how the market is evolving, why is that happening? Things don't happen in a vacuum. There are external and internal factors that are pushing them. You mentioned, Enrique, the regulatory dynamic here. Obviously the implementation is on all of this stuff is piecemeal and questionable in the new political reality that we're in today. But the signal certainly around closing the lead, what you could call the lead generator loophole, essentially the co-reg lead path, has been clear and consistent. And we've seen most major aggregators already adopt process set around, one-to-one requirement of opt-in. Brandon, you were telling me that I don't think you guys buy any non-exclusive leads anymore. And that's certainly, a factor that's impacting aggregator ability to monetize. If those of us that have been in the space for a long time remember, really long co-reg paths where, you would essentially be able to buy a, fairly expensive click. And then because you were able to effectively monetize that to a variety of advertisers, and you could take into account the fact that some of them would effectively work the lead that you were generating, that made the economics work much better. The regulatory changes are certainly having an impact on that. The technology side is also having an impact. And Brandon, maybe I'll cue you to talk about the organic side here in a second, because we were having an interesting pre-show conversation about that. But from the paid side, the tools that primary advertisers have to be able to directly monetize unbranded search has increased dramatically. So, as the ability to sort of predict and expect when someone that's going about their business and in a search path is ready to convert to your brand's your school's brand, that's allowing smart advertisers, which we'll talk about from a behavioral perspective here, to really sort of own more of the real estate for the brands in the paid space. What about on the organic side? We were talking a little bit about how AIO and search generative experience is starting to change some of the fundamental dynamics on that side. But talk to me a little bit about what that means in terms of the PPL space.
It's brutal. It's great because it's natural. I mean, obviously, I use generative. I mean, I love the fact that I get a culmination of what I'm really looking for. It can answer most of my question in one quick, result. But bottom line is in the past, people used to have to go find the information, click, and go to a website, and that's why we generate. And I have entire SEO team and a writing team that creates content just basically to create what we call Google juice, right? Get Google to reference us. We want to be ranked for this keyword and so forth. And we spend a lot of time and money in it. When generative AI came out, it immediately hammered us. As a whole, the industry as a whole, brands are now seeing organic traffic is down 18 as high as 64%. At National University, we're between 16 and 20% down in our organic traffic. We have some keywords that we're losing over 600 visits a month just because of generative AI. So in essence, it's really causing advertisers to try to do something different. So it's forced us to spend more money in search. And Google will not tell you this in the ads. They go around it all the time. Every time I bring it up, I'm like, you guys are manipulating us to have to spend more money in search. And they know it, but they won't admit it. But yes, we are now spending more money in search. So our overall search budgets have increased 10% in the last in the last 6 to 9 months. But the bottom line is in FY26, we're probably going to have to hit 20 to 25% of our budget. We're going to increase search budget by 20, 25%. And that's, quite frankly, I got to find out where it's going to be. It's going to be in the PPL space. Yep. That's the only place I can get it, right? So that's why it's a huge piece of this puzzle.
Totally. And then from a behavioral perspective, I mentioned the advertisers like Brandon, adjusting their spend, becoming more sophisticated and being able to be more competitive, in the search results, in a way that maybe wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. And then also your prospects, your prospective students are, doing a lot more research, in advance, in the digital ecosystem, and they're becoming increasingly adept at going to primary source and trusted secondary, social and review sources. But it's, they are doing more of their research on a self-service basis rather than in a aggregator's funnel basis, which was a a big model a few years ago.
That's a good point.
Go to the next slide.
Just to add on this behavioral stat,
Yeah.
there's something that I realized that 85 to 90% of the students never fill until enrollment. They never fill a generic, lead form. So, like you said, they do all the research by themselves. When they're ready to, to take the next step, they'll go to your website or to your ad, and they're gonna go there willingly and fill out this information. So, I think personalization and having a really well done marketing with really high quality, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be the differentiator in this new not a new era, but because it's already happening. But having high quality marketing, really personalized pages, chatbots, for instance, any kind of automated help center using generative AI or RAG is also going to be really is already actually really helpful for institutions to convert.
For sure. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the some of the specific implementations there when we talk about improving pay per lead. But this is, I think, an illustration of how all these legs of the triangle come together. So this is the kind of the classic term, online education, or graduate education, that historically aggregators, big pay per lead generators, did a phenomenal job in capturing value from these types of keywords in the past. They used to own these types of keywords from both a paid and an organic perspective. And they were really the only ones that were set up well to be able to do that, because a very broad keyword like this does not have a ton of very explicit intent. So if you're going to be targeting someone that is searching for a broad term like online education or graduate education, unless you know a lot about what the context for their search is, you have to have a wide variety of options, which the aggregators do. But now the brands own these results. And obviously everyone's search result pages are different, all that. But in this example, we had done some, I clicked through a number of ads, visited a number of pages that were associated with some of these brands before we got to this result. And some of the things that just to call out here. So we talked about the monetization piece. Regulatory dynamics are making it harder to monetize multiple brands. Google's making it more possible to predict when someone is ready to convert for your specific brand. So now, because of the way that these more sophisticated brand advertisers who know how to buy these signals are buying the signals, they know they're not just buying online education in a vacuum. They're buying effectively someone that has already been to my website, and somebody that has is Google sees as in market for online graduate education, or whatever is coming through that signal. That they don't even have to be conscious as an advertiser to be targeting that segment specifically. They can just be in a maximize the the value or the amount of conversions bid strategy, and they're pulling all of that data into the auction automatically, right? And Google has made those tools much more accessible to the advertisers over the last 4 or 5 years. So what has happened is, this space that used to be, very, more often than not, you'd see a lot of, top of page organic results for something like online education. And then when you saw the paid results, they would be, very, very aggregator heavy. Effectively has been transitioned to a space where the brands are owning this real estate more directly. So if that's our problem, what do we do about it, right? If this is our consensus professional, doctor's opinion as to what our issue is, what's the prescription? And essentially, there's two sides to this that we're going to take 10 or 15 minutes to unpack. So if pay per lead doesn't work as well as it used to, you can either shift dollars and evaluate budget allocations and measurement strategies in a way that takes that into account, or you can get more out of the portion of your pay per lead that is or the portion of your budget that is allocated to pay per lead, or you can do both, right? Which is essentially the recommendation that we're making, is to do some level of both of those things here. So let's start with the budget allocations and expectations. So Brandon, just to get you, if you're going to go to the next slide, Evan, the man behind the curtain. In our prep call, you said something really interesting that I pulled down here and we quoted basically verbatim. I think the insight here that this quote gets at is that if you think of pay-per-lead as something separate from your overarching media mix, it is increasingly not a good buy because of the unit economics that we've talked about. But can you talk a little bit about how you are challenging your partners and how you've tried to challenge partners to think of it as more holistically part of the budget allocation?
Yeah, this is very complex because I'm challenged heavily. And I apologize if there's some background noise. It's just there's some vacuuming going on the outside of the door. But I am challenged with a organization. We recently, or several years ago, we bought North Central University. North Central University was 80% PPL leads. National University, zero PPL leads. Now, when you combine those two ecosystems together, the mindset is like, why do we need? We've built National University since 1971 into a brand without having to buy leads. And what I kept hearing in there is buy means transactional. And the problem with the industry as a whole, and I'm going to say it out loud and then we'll get into some of this detail. The problem with the industry as a whole, this industry cannot get out of its own way. It continuously wants to sell me leads versus tell me the leads that you're selling, what you're doing for my brand. So money going from PPL is moving into CPC programs, CPM programs, other things that we can monetize because we can put an ROI against a awareness. Like how many impressions are you getting in front of people? And I've asked for the last year and a half for every one of my vendors, and we have a lot of them, to give me some idea of what you're doing for my brand. And I have gotten zero from them. So what's happening now, because I can't articulate that up to upper management as why it's part of the media mix, it's transactional. It's a nice to have, but not a must have. That's our problem. So that's where I'm at right now. So I'm trying to change things internally, not just internally, but with all of our partners and coming up with new ideas on how they can, I'm just going to help them help themselves. The bottom line is how much money you spend. That very first question, what is the right level of PPL budget for your business? That's a case-by-case basis. I can tell you at National, again, we were 80% at NCU. Right now as a whole, we're at like 10 to 13% of our budget is PPL, but it's shrinking. And part of it is shrinking. One reason is because the industry itself has not been able to provide the number of leads I need. I give them budget and they're under delivering by 10 to 15% every single month. So what's happening is my budgets are going down and I'm reallocating those funds over to search. That's where it's going. So the industry as a whole, right now, because we've gone in October, we've moved over to just a one-to-one lead model. But the industry, we're just not getting as many leads. The other thing is it really depends on, can your enrollment team handle it? If you have one or two people that can understand the PPL leads, then you're going to have to adjust your budgets to it, because I'm going to tell you, you're not going to convert leads, PPL leads, as if they were like web leads that you get, and organic leads that you get. So you got to have that. In reality, in my opinion, I've moved over from, I don't care about CPL. I don't care about a cost per lead. It doesn't matter to me. You could charge me $2,500, but if it has the best cost per start, or that's to be predictive, but if it has the best cost per application, I will move dollars there. I don't care about the lead cost, because to me, it's really about the quality lead, less leads, because ultimately that moves into how you measure the success of those budgets. That's why I was saying, it's not on a cost per lead. It's really, in my opinion, the newer models are cost per start, cost per app mindsets. And ultimately what I really believe, and this is where I'm trying to move to, is that we can look at cost per start, cost per app, but you need to combine that with a CPM, CPC model so that we can also understand, yeah, I paid you for this lead, but how much did you do for my brand? And then I can start quantifying it by my spends actually going to support our brand and awareness efforts as well. So totally. I
think what you're describing, Brandon, I think is a really interesting miss on the part of the industry to really say, like, I think people have taken for granted that pay-per-lead does not impact your brand value in a way that is not really supported by any research that I've ever seen, right? Every time we've done media mix modeling, like, yes, higher awareness channels like social, like display, like CTV, like streaming video, of course, those types of channels over-index in terms of attributed lift. But pay-per-lead has a profile, just like, non-brand search has a profile of assisted conversion and assisted impact on a media mix model. And it's not surprising. I mean, of course, if somebody is talking about your brand to a consumer, maybe it's even in a call center capacity, like, they're hearing about the brand from somebody. And why would that not affect their brand knowledge or their brand equity in some way? Or if it's a web experience, right? They're seeing your brand. Sure, it's not your landing page. Maybe it's not your website, but they're seeing your brand, in a compliant way out there in the wild. Of course, it's going to have some level of impact on the overall brand profile. And I think there's a big missed opportunity to lean into that if I were in the aggregator space, which I'm not.
I'm gonna quantify this for this group, because it's rarely, I've had two, this is the second opportunity, I have two opportunities in my 30 plus years of doing this to actually quantify some things that in the past nobody could do. And Pat, you're part of one of those. At one point, we had a DR-minded president come into one of our universities and say, shut down display advertising because he didn't see the return on investment. We shut it off 100%. And within 3 weeks, our web leads dropped like a rock, 50%. We turned it back on because he freaked, like, turn it back on. We turned it back on. This is display advertising. Yeah. Our web leads went back up 50%, right? Like, literally, we could see it. The second opportunity, this is why it's huge to the PPL industry. This is why I'm just adamant about this. We bought a university, North Central University. We rebranded North Central. We never had bought PPL leads at National. So nobody in the PPL area even knew who National was. When we converted, we spent 3 months converting all of our PPL channels to National, literally overnight. We immediately started seeing our search traffic, organic traffic go up. Our search traffic started increasing. And then my brand search team was going, look how great I'm doing. And I said, well, do you want to layer it? You're getting exposure. We're getting exposure from the PPL industry that we never were there before. So clearly, if there's a brand play, but yet the industry cannot tell me what they're doing for us, I had to do that myself.
Yeah, it's a great example. Go ahead, Enrique.
Yeah, no, just to the point that Brandon made earlier, I have a counterintuitive stat that we notice here. You mentioned, I fully agree with you to have quality over quantity, but we noticed that most of our customers are increasing their spend in PPL instead of decreasing, like 10% year over year, which is with all the issues that we talked about, they're still putting some more money there. And the other thing that you talked about, when you have the admissions team, a lot of leads to handle. That's why I feel like we should more and more rely on CRM or lead management systems to help your team to keep track of the entire application file, not just the initial parts. How many inquiries applied, got accepted, ended up enrolling. So having kind of like granular view helps you to cut down the channels that are not converting and double down on the ones that are. So I would say in this case, it's all about optimization and having more access to the data. Because like I said, it's quality, not quantity. But with the quantity, at least you can know what's not working and what you're doing wrong. So you can optimize your strategy. So there's still some value in having quantity, but I fully agree that quality is, the way to go. First party leads, going to your website, like I said before, focusing on creating your own content. But there's still something there. I see institutions are still spending money on PPL and increasing the expenditure, so which is interesting and ironic in some ways.
Well, I think in most cases that's because in many cases they don't have great alternatives, and this kind of leads to this last one, which is, you heard from Level, we've our clients have cut their reliance on this source, and one of the ways that they've been able to do that is by, we've provided them with a really powerful set of alternatives that can fix, fill the volume demand. And search for us, we've been really successful in scaling search programs, getting 2 or 3x amount out of your search. We're actually starting to see really great, surprisingly good results out of Performance Max, which Google rolled out way too quickly. It was not ready for lead aggregators, or for lead generators rather. It now, if you configure it the right way, if you set the signal up in the right way, and you key off of high propensity conversion signals, we're starting to see that work as well. And then YouTube and other channels like that, social, TikTok, we're getting a ton of demand out of. So basically, you should have alternatives as an advertiser. If you're in a position where you can't work out a path out of pay-per-lead, it probably means that you don't have the right alternatives identified, and ability to sort of scale out of pay-per-lead.
I just slightly disagree with you. I don't think it's that they don't have alternatives. I would say they don't have easy alternatives. PPL is just easy, but if you want to put the marketing strategy in place, to put all the work in place to create high quality content, to invest and develop a full laid on strategy, it's much harder and more complex. Sometimes they don't have the headcount or the budget for that. They do have the alternatives, just not as easy as PPL. So
yeah, Enrique is making a really, really good point. And the alternatives are changing quickly with artificial intelligence, right? But you just brought it up, Pat, is TikTok. TikTok's our number 3 search engine for us. Google, YouTube, TikTok. Those are the 3. Interesting enough, I've just hired some people from WGU who spends way more money than we do, and they've never even thought about touching TikTok. We're in TikTok. We've been in TikTok for a while. They're great partners, and they do an amazing job for us. Just amazing job. Just a different way of looking. I have an influencer team on my team. I have an influencer budget. So we hire influencers. That's a different way of doing things, right? And it's really hard, though. How much DR do you throw into it? But quite frankly, using CAPIs, conversion APIs, where you're sending, and we're doing Performance Max, that is helping a lot. The problem is it's working too good, and now everybody wants to just throw more money into that. And the bottom line is you can't just put all your, in my opinion, don't put all your eggs in the search basket, right? It's a recipe for disaster down the stream. But the other is really artificial intelligence, AI. We're doing some studies right now. We're testing some technology right now that immediately when somebody hits our site and we get some PII, we understand them really quickly. We do predictive scoring that's about 87 to 90% accurate to understand what they are. And then my teams will eventually, within the next few months, we're going to start optimizing by channel, understanding how much money because the system's going to start telling us, spend more money here, less money here. But what I need, because I'm a regional university in Southern California that's growing nationally, I need to understand where I need to put my money nationally. I need to know where to put it in DMAs. Which DMA am I going to spend my money with? By the way, we graduate 1,500 doctoral candidates a year. 1,500. To be an R1 university, you have to graduate just 50. We do 1,500. We graduate more African American female doctorates than any place in the country, probably the world. And many of them come from, for whatever reason, Georgia. Now, where am I going to spend my money and what messages am I going to do? I'm going to focus on African American females in Georgia and at the doctoral level. But how do you do that without AI? How do you really understand that without AI and technologies? So those are the alternatives we get to. But and the PPL industry is starting to get smarter about it too. Bottom line is there's nobody better than generating leads than PPL. And we all know the guys that are really good generate because their conversion rates are higher than other PPL. Yeah. So what I'm doing? I'm partnering with multiple PPL guys and saying, I want you to teach me how to fish. And we're partnering with them. And we're doing it right now. I've got a trip next week with our CMO. And we're going to start partnering with them to say, you need to teach us how to fish. Because right now all we're doing is they're giving us a fish.
So what I think just to summarize on this thread, it's the strategic value add component and the holistic approach that that you're valuing as the brand. You know, and Enrique, it's the differentiated conversion approach that makes that possible as a technology partner. So let's move on, Evan, to the last point, which I think that was actually hopefully a good segue into. So if part of what we're doing is solving for the portion of our budget that is either growing, shrinking, or staying the same, that remains pay per lead, what do we need to do to get consistent throughput and performance from that portion of the budget? And I know Brandon has some strong opinion. We both have some strong opinions about lead scoring and predictive modeling and how to use that in smart ways that are not that are not misaligned with consumer expectations. But Enrique, I wonder if you could start just by talking a little bit about what LeadSquared's position is on how to make the most of that increasing portion of your clients' budgets that are going to pay per lead.
Sure, definitely. I can do a deep dive on the specific questions later, but just to give a generic overview on how to solve through better PPL, I would say that the way to start it's basically with the PPL vendors and asking the tough questions like how do you collect consent? Are the leads exclusive? Can you prove each lead source? What's your strategy to capture those leads? And it's pretty easy to tell if they actually have a direct and straightforward answer, or if they're not, maybe it's time to rethink the partnership. So the first thing would be really optimizing, again, the PPL vendors that you're working with. And the second thing that's also really helpful that we notice here, and we do that at LeadSquared, is immediate follow-up, speed to lead. There's a saying in admissions, I think it's like first to contact, first to contract. Because even if let's say you decide to keep using, PPL, you can mitigate the waste by responding to new leads within the first 5 to 10 minutes, for instance. We've noticed that you respond within the first hour, there's a 4 times greater chances to convert versus having a late response. So one thing that we do at LeadSquared is categorizing those leads, and through lead scoring, we can prioritize who should be contacted first. If you have like a limited team, a lot of leads, for instance, that's something that you can do. So I would say that the main thing is to combine, PPL with an effective nurturing program. Like we just talked about, for instance, if the leads are not, quite ready to convert, you can automate. You can do that with LeadSquared, for instance. You can automate a drip campaign with more relevant content, and whenever their engagement picks up, your CRM will alert your admissions team to follow up again. So you're not going to be overflowing with information, a new lead, but you can pretty much categorize and prioritize the leads that are ready to, to move to the next step. So that's a more natural and, in my opinion, a more effective approach as well, both for converting and also optimizing the resources and how your staff on the admission side is going to spend their time.
Hey, Brandon, do you want to take us home on just Enrique mentioned the lead scoring piece here. I know that that's a strong piece of your strategy. I know for Level, we actually use LeadSquared across all of our leads as a pre-lead system to do some predictive lead scoring that we feed back into algorithmic bidding strategies, which is a really neat tactic that I would love to talk to anybody about that's curious about that. But yeah, Brandon, why don't you take us home just in terms of how to think about lead scoring as part of this if I'm a brand.
Yeah, I think most brands don't really understand it, and most brands don't understand the vastness of how you can leverage lead scoring across all your business units, not just marketing, right? I was just pulling up a document because we're putting together a whole lead scoring. There's internal struggles on who owns lead scoring. Well, who generates the leads? Marketing, performance marketing generates them. So it's really at the beginning. The problem is most lead scoring models have been very engagement based, well, if they told you this, they told you this, they told you this, and they visit these certain site pages, That's the signals that are going to give you a score. But the more sophisticated models are leveraging more audience modeling around like doctoral, like I've used multiple score. I've been doing lead scoring and machine learning for 10 years. It works like a champ if you do it right, but you can't generalize it. You can't have like one size fits all. The scoring has got to be thinking at the doctoral, master's, bachelor's level. If you do certificates and so forth, they're just different audiences. You got to better understand them. And, but you got to build an audience model around that. But the bottom line is if you're between in my opinion, I mean, between 80 and 91%, you're good. Don't overthink it. Don't underthink it. You overthink it like, oh, well, we need to be perfect. Well, no. And the data side of your business will argue that you can't do scoring until our data is clean. That's not true either. The point is the scoring is huge. You predictably upfront, you get it. But then you have to have engagement scoring to improve it over time. So if an individual comes in, they're scored at a 75, but they opened your email and they did all this other work, maybe they'd be coming out an 80. But what happens is it's all the other factors that it touches out there. And Enrique already brought it up. It's all of how you just, and by the way, not just on PPL, you score everything. Yeah. Everything that goes through like Enrique's system, right? And that's why and then our biggest problem is the number of leads we generate against the number of enrollment advisors who has the time to follow up and to speed the lead. You got to have some sort of a prioritization process. I could do an entire 2-hour session just on lead scoring because it's so important to business now today, but it's just, so I can't even give it justice right now. It's just, but it's so important.
Well, maybe we'll take you up on that master class. I think, one of the things that you said that really stands out to me, like it is about internal process and prioritization more so than about telling, your vendors that you want to buy more of X and less of Y, because they will find ways to reverse engineer the model. And I mean, essentially you're telling them to reverse engineer the model, and it typically doesn't do what you want it to when it's approached in that way. So I would think of it absolutely more of an internal, prioritization, lead routing tool and an algorithmic signal than something to sort of, try to buy more, category A and less of category B. Ultimately, you can use those predictors to influence your budget strategy, but I would let that, I would buy.
And by the way, there's a prospect. I call them prospect and students. So prospect scoring, you take that score, then you handshake that off to our student experience teams. They can actually take that score and they can start using that score to better predict who's going to be successful in programs. And then you can take those scores and you pump it back to your AI engine that then develops the scores, and it makes your engine smarter. So it's so many layers of what you can do with this, and you have to think of it not just full funnel, but the entire student experience all the way through graduation.
All right, so I'm going to get us. I think we're wrapping up here on time. So let me move quickly to the lightning round here as it relates to bold predictions. Brandon, why don't you get us started? I know you're always good for a bold prediction. What's your hot take?
My bold prediction is if the PPL industry doesn't innovate, they're going to be they will. Well, I feel like those are already starting to innovate, but if you're not in that process of innovating, you're going to be gone. You will be gone in the next couple of years, because we're advertisers. I know Enrique said some of your guys are moving more dollars to it. I'm not seeing it. We're moving dollars away from it. We're optimizing. Our enrollment teams are too big. I need to shrink them down. We will save a ton of money doing that. We need to optimize those leads. AI is making me smarter. I know when you're sending me junk leads or not. So the people industry just has to really get smarter about understanding that we're getting smarter. And your competitors are really search and social. And so how to involve that? I believe that 50% for a PPL organization to survive, 50% have to be transactional selling leads. Your other 50%, you got to get into the CPC, CPM business and understand what you bring to the table that helps me build my brand. Yeah.
Enrique, what's your bold prediction?
Yeah, I already anticipated that before. I think when we were talking about the second slide, I totally agree with Brandon. I think with the new regulations, it might be the end of PPL as we know it. I'm not sure how one can adapt to the regulations. Also with browser changes, for instance, the end of third-party cookies. So my hot take here is that we're in the early days of AI. but there's got to be some kind of AI SEO. They're not familiar with that. We're not sure how to optimize your institution for LLM generated answers or searches. So I would say building your own database of prospective students, for instance, through compelling content, this new AI SEO, direct engagement is going to lead to higher intent and better control over compliance as well. And having a really effective way to personalize things through AI is going to make all the difference. We noticed that most students are doing the research by themselves, and we have, I think, over 400 million monthly active users using ChatGPT, for instance, today. And I would assume, I don't have this data, but mostly it would be younger generations. So the way that people search for content is changing. And I don't have the answer for that for now, but there's got to be a better way to adapt to those changes. And honestly, I feel overall it's going to be better for the internet, because we use, Brandon was talking about this, we used to create content just for SEO purposes. You know, we needed to have blog posts with keywords and everything. And now we have to create high quality content with reputable sources. And that's got to be a way to make it your search more effective. So focusing on high quality marketing content and content overall is going to be in my opinion, the differentiator for the future, which is good for everyone. We're going to have maybe less content, but more quality outputs. Cool. Or not. Gen AI is everywhere, so maybe we're going to have even more content. Hopefully,
well, you're seeing the blowback on that already. So I think that pendulum will swing in the other direction. Okay, I'm going to take us to questions so that we've got a couple of minutes here. Thank you for the awesome expert perspective. Do we have any questions? Evan, I don't know if you can highlight anyone that is that might be raising their hand. Otherwise, I'm not seeing anything in the comments yet.
Did we lose Evan?
I think he's there. He's the man behind the curtain. All right, one that I had. So what is the, I guess if you are trying to operationalize everything that you've heard, what's the thing that you do first? Like, what's your first step, Brandon? If you were hearing this for the first time, what would be the very first thing that you would look at?
Well, first thing I would look at my cost per, and I'd change my mindset there. Don't think of it a cost per lead. Really dig into and see if you can isolate it down to a cost per start would be great, but at least a cost per application. I'm even starting to look at cost per transfer. So for example, if PPL, what leads are transferring at higher rates than other leads, and that'll give you an indicator. Right? You just got to work down. If you can't get transfer, get contact, but I think you can get transfer rates, right? Especially if you're using a call center. But that's really the place to start if you're really just trying to clean up and understand what you have and what you're receiving. There's a lot of other things that I've already talked about today that you could do, but that's one of the places I would start.
Enrique, what about you? What's your starting place?
I would say the starting place would be making sense of all the information they're getting. We used to talk about that with the beginning of big data, that data is the new oil. I feel this kind of like cheesy to say right now, but still true. I feel like even Brendan was talking about this before. There's a lot of data coming in, and you have to know how to make sense of this data to optimize the outcomes. And this comes with powerful platforms, powerful tools, training the admissions team, for instance. So I would say that the first step is making sense of your data to optimize your strategy. It doesn't matter if it's different channels, different approaches, double down on strategies like PPL, for instance, I'm not sure. But making sense using powerful tools with we have AI today, but to make sense of the data to optimize the outcomes, I would say that's the way to start for every marketing campaign.
Thanks, Enrique. Brandon, quick follow-up question from Amber here in the chat. Thank you, Amber. What's the cost per transfer? What do you mean when you talk about cost per transfer
a call center
in your model?
Yeah, so if you so you have your total spend, you can do it by vendor, or you just do it as a general rule, or by degree level. But you have your spend, and you then get the transfer rate back with the number of transfers against that spend from your call center. So a call center transferring a lead they pick it up. Now we have a call center. You may not, Amber, but it's the number of, because 100% of our PPL leads go through a call center. So they pre-qual and then they transfer them. So that you can just do how much did it cost me for that transfer. And I exclude, now I can include the call center costs, but I typically don't because I really want to just get it down to the cost of the media I bought, which would be a lead.
So it's a good leading indicator, Amber, for like quality, because it's not, you don't have to wait all the way for enrollment dynamics or application dynamics. You can see more quickly.
Better put. Better put than I
on,
yeah.
All good. All right, we're at time. Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk. I hope you enjoyed the content. And Brandon, Enrique, thank you so much for being here. See you soon.
Thanks.